Welcome to another episode of Collective Conversations. I'm very excited. We have a very special guest today, Darren Sharpe. Darren comes to us from SuiteSpot Technology. He is the Chief Revenue Officer at the company. And I'm very excited about this piece of technology. I had the opportunity to read through 15 pages of notes so that we could get this conversation kicked off in the right way. But I'd like to welcome Darren to the show. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about SuiteSpot before we kick into what I think will be a very vibrant conversation.
Well, Mike, first, thank you very much for having me. Excited to be on. I'm relatively new into multifamily. I unlike some of your previous guests, I didn't fall into multifamily. I chose it. So I'm by trade. I've been a company builder and a sales professional in my career, and really dove into this amazing company, SuiteSpot, and now got a chance to be welcomed into this multifamily community. I think that's been one of the great surprises of now selling into this marketplace. Is it really is a community, and from great online mentors like Gary Gregory or Steve Wunsch to our clients who have really accepted me as relatively new, but eager to learn and take part within this community.
You mentioned some real stalwart people there. I just salt of the earth people. Steve is a very good friend of mine, and you know what? Your remark also brought to mind something I heard Mike Wobler say recently. Rent Dynamics, I believe, is the name of the company he works for, works with, or owns, or co-founds, or something of that nature. Forgive me, Mike. But it really is community, right? And relationship. And I think multifamily really warms up to that. Maybe by default, we're in the resident business, and that really does work well when you put relationship at the forefront. So
Exactly. And then from a SuiteSpot perspective, like SuiteSpot Technology, we're a holistic maintenance software. So we really want to take all of the friction out of your maintenance workflows. Like I love to talk to you about how it's actually something that you'd mentioned on a podcast over a year ago. But hey, like software that can take all of the friction out from notice to vacate in a happy renter. And we absolutely look at there's some interesting trends happening in the industry now. We have a labor shortage on maintenance. Yet, at no part as maintenance right now is probably playing the biggest role it ever has in resident sat. And I think we're hitting some interesting divergent forces there, where we have a new group of maintenance techs and professionals coming on staff, right? And we have a change in expectation of both the resident and the employee. Yet we're sticking with the status quo too often on how operations are moving forward. And so, I think 2022 is a big year for that kind of operational change, and we're sure seeing it within our marketplace.
And so I know it comes to mind for me, but what do you think is driving that? So from the people that are serving the business and or the people that are coming in as a resident or a vendor partner, et cetera, is coming into the business, and so those two things colliding, what is it that is driving that? I think there's an implied point you were making there that at least came to mind for me. What do you think is driving that?
Yeah, I think like a digital experience across the board is becoming the expectation. And we look at it as the expectation of the operator themselves to take the blind spots out of their reporting so they have visibility to everything. The digital experience that the tenant expects, like we talk about all the time, that if a tenant orders a package, UPS tells them when it's going to arrive, the shape it's going to arrive. Why can't we deliver maintenance operations as well as UPS can deliver a package? And, so we look at those shifting expectations of both the tenant, leadership and operations, but also the expectation of the maintenance team, who we think have been undertooled, in that, like we look at, like we hear all the time from clients who both existing clients and prospects about, the teams being undermanned. We look at it and think they're undertooled. And part of making this job and retaining these great new folks you're hiring is to give them the workplace tools so they can be super effective at their job, so they're not doing a bunch of callbacks to the same angry tenant, where they can excel in their work. We think it's a real positive change that you can deliver to that maintenance team, is providing better tools and workflow so they can be brilliant at their jobs.
Wow. You said a lot there, and you said a lot of fantastic and wonderful things I think a great many of us have often thought about things that you've just said, but no one's really brought that together in a package, right? that that really serves the service team member into your lead-in point, the most important interaction in terms of resident satisfaction in the business of property management, right? No one's ever really brought that together in a package. And look, prior to getting on this call, I didn't know anything about SuiteSpot technology, and I don't mean that as a discount to you, but I read this and I'm like blown away. Right? You've put this thing together in a package that, if I'm a service team member, I'm going to use the word gamification. That might be overused at this point, but there is sort of an emotionally gamified element to this technology. Was that something that was intentional from the get go?
Absolutely. So, like, one of our founding principles is to serve the maintenance team and their direct leadership. So we do that in a couple ways. One, if every work order, if everything task that you need to do comes into your mobile phone, it is clear on when it's due, where it is. You now can take pictures. The resident, their entry code, whatever it is, so you can go be brilliant at that job. You can go see all of the history in that suite. When you get there, the app can work offline. It can work in any language. It connects back to all major PMSs. So we're enabling them. So we look at that as a foundational principle in the app. But secondarily, how we manage those folks, how we dispatch that work. So we want to let those managers be able to see, here's the delineation of that labor, so I can see where I've got gaps, where I can move folks, so that now we have more efficient task distribution across the skill sets of our team.
It, I feel like there are like 15 jumping off points here, because I have a million questions, and I mean that. I let's 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 carve out workflow for a second, okay?
Yeah.
It, you said a lot there. Let's just carve out workflow. I know you have an engine or sort of a, let's call that the back office UPS, the logistics piece that I believe what you're saying hides behind here. It's back here. It's not up here. It's right. It's fueling this whole thing. Um, Within that workflow, there's an interesting point that you made in terms. I'm going to label it labor distribution. I think you said it just a little bit differently, but my imagination tells me that um, if so, let's say service request comes in, and I'm going to talk about origin of request in a second. I want to unpack that in a second, but
Perfect.
so request comes in, and that request, the system back here knows where to move that based on, maybe you've done some preloading. But let's talk to me about that. So service request is an origin. Let's talk about the back office here for a second. What happens?
Sure. So let's use a Yardi example. So say we're on Rent Cafe, and by the way, we integrate seamlessly with whatever your PMS is to maximize that leverage point, but have SuiteSpot replace it as a maintenance OS. So we do the maintenance pieces, but we still fully talk back to the PMS. So let's just use a Rent Cafe example. So a service request goes into Rent Cafe. It gets automated through SuiteSpot. We connect back to Yardi, and now we're going to deliver that as a work order with all of that information from Rent Cafe. So now we've have taken the resident information from Yardi, provided it to the maintenance team member with full information of what the issue is, how they can action it. All of that lives within SuiteSpot. So now when they go into that suite, they can still leverage SuiteSpot to complete the work order. So from their clock in, clock out, to having full visibility, to be able to do a mass call of the client to confirm time, all of that can happen within SuiteSpot. And then when we're in Suite, we can leverage the app to take pictures, to document. We can, if there's assets in that in the suite, in the unit, we can take pictures and leverage our asset tracking, see warranty information, with the goal being, and the last thing I'll say in work order, that's great. So we do a full unit history within the app. So anytime any other maintenance team member has been in the app, in the unit, they see that activity. So they know if this is a callback. They know if on this fridge, this is the third time we're replacing this issue. So that does two things. It's really powerful. One, when the person who's now actioning this, they can talk to the resident with full history. And there's nothing that can be more embarrassing than the resident knowing 10 times more about the issue than your expert, right? So secondarily, we now can reduce callbacks. So we can say, hey, look, this is the third time this is happening. We've tried this and this. I have my notes from my other team members here. I can go in and either bring the right tools, bring the right tone, whatever I need to do to go service this. But again, like we're talking about, the best way to be a tool to the maintenance team is to empower them. And we want to empower them with data and empower them with an actionable device.
I I love this, and something comes to mind for me. It sort of in this vein of labor distribution. So, and let's use your callback scenario as an example. So, if that callback scenario is a result of that team member who's been back 3 times now, and really that is a deficiency in their ability or capability, does the system have, or can it, or future state have an ability to sort of factor that in, right, to the algorithm, so to speak, so that system sees something that needs to be acted upon, and it looks at capability of labor, and it says Mark is the guy. Let's send, and not only is Mark the guy, but he's the closest one to the unit. He happens to be driving by on the golf cart because our system knows where he's at all the time, and he's like, Mark, go over there and take care of that. Is it
So
there?
I'll tell you a little bit how we work. And one, this is a constant innovation path for us. So one thing we look at is every team member has different skill sets. So we're
Okay.
able, so we can break things down: plumbing, electrical, all of our maintenance skills, which allows us to sort all future work orders and be able to reassign. Right.
Yep.
So we could say, hey, if we have a team member who is an amazing electrician, that's his trade, he's going to do 80% of our electrical work and 20% of general work orders. We can route that way. But you asked another question on how are we checking performance. So we look at it. We're able to actually support real KPIs of your maintenance team, time to resolution on different types. So we could say, hey, when Dan does plumbing related work orders, his time to resolution is 4 hours over the median. We may have an issue here, right? So you mentioned early how we gamify that, but we can gamify this in a really positive way to drive what is great performance, right? And be able to showcase. And also we do a ton of comparative metrics, property over property. So we're able to say, hey, we're closing off work orders on an average of this at property A. At property C, we're 2x that. Now, is this an FTE issue? Do we need more manpower? Is this a training issue? Are there other things going on in the property, preventative maintenance or other tasks that are pulling away? Do we need to, all of those things? But what we see too much in our industry is we make assumptions in maintenance, not based on data, not based on, but I can tell you now, this property versus this property on data. Now we can look at changing headcount. Now we can look at highlighting the great and solving where we have actual problem, not where we think we have problem because of the loudest assumption in the room.
I love that. I love
Am I being crazy on that, or
No, look, I can't tell you how many times guys like me are guilty of sitting in boardrooms with, labor studies in the old fashioned way where we baked them into Excel spreadsheets and we did these kind of assumptions, it kind of feels like, and it should be, and et cetera, et cetera. And then we decide, we should shave half a person, or, we should add half a person, but it's based on nothing. It's based on our gut and our intuition, which isn't wrong all the time, but it's probably not as accurate as your data.
well, what do you think of the 100-to-1 rule?
I think that was probably should have been done away with, I don't know, 20 years ago, plus minus.
Again, and I think it works in some properties, but I think every property is unique, right? And you have to be able to, or our interpretation is there's a uniqueness across a portfolio, and to lean in to the fact that they are unique and serve them differently. And I think if we do that, we end up having better employee retention and better resident sat.
I agree. That principle probably served well when you didn't have the data and insight and transparency that you do today, or the ability to collect the kind of data that you're collecting, right?
That's if you've put in processes to collect that data.
That's right.
Because the one of the gaps we see is we still see a ton of paper and pen maintenance. We see like we see the whiteboard in the maintenance office, and I get it. That's an important. It's been a really important tool for us, but the world has changed, and what the whiteboard represents. It's a static representation of a dynamic process, and we now have really smart people making decisions based off bad data because just because it's on the whiteboard, that's not truth. So we end up making real decisions that affect make ready dates, that affect our vendor interactions, these real things, and it's predicated off of what is expired data, and that's a standard for us, Mike. Like,
That's right. And I can't tell you how many times I've been out doing site visits and I happen to rub my shoulder against the dry erase make ready board, and all of a sudden we've lost some of that data that wasn't accurate in the first place, right?
well, then it actually proves, it speaks to the tool.
Right.
If as you're walking through the door, that it can radically change the data set.
Exactly right. Okay, so I want to take I don't know if this is a left turn, right turn, but it's sort of I'm using the service request as a jumping off point, or maybe I want to fast forward to something that I've read recently of sort of a principle of point of procurement, right? And this is like prior to point of sale. I don't know where it sits in that sort of hierarchy, but the story I tell myself is that at a point of procurement, you SuiteSpot has all of this baked in data from scanning asset tags or barcodes on physical assets in the unit. You've basically inventoried everything in the community, or at least that's the way. So then you sort of have this ability that when Mark goes in and he uses an escutcheon, right, and he puts that in the shower, over the shower in the bathtub, and that comes out of his inventory. In my head, your system knows that he just used an escutcheon. Now we have point of procurement where you can actually facilitate or automate the inventory replenishment from whatever vendor you might work with.
You're a quarter ahead of us. So
okay.
No, but it's an important point of how do we take all of the friction out of that process,
Right.
So today, what we're able to do is go in from an inspection, take pictures or take assets, and draw up from a requirement and purchase through HD supply, and we can drive that. The evolution of that is exactly what you're saying, is then be able to read into your inventory. So I will say this, that's in beta for us. So we actually are testing in that today to only further that process so that when I define needs in Suite, it not can just order, but can pull from inventory, right? And that's because the biggest challenge we're running there, though, and this is not to cast stones in industry, the inventory management piece is underserviced. So when we're working with this challenge, we have to have a trusted data set that's digital of our inventory, and we'll connect to it. But not everyone manages that as well as they would think today. And I think so. We're actually highlighting some issues on our prospects in that it's one of those things that maintenance teams are very busy and are not always as diligent in updating. So therefore, I'll leave it there. But when you brought up a service request through traditional service requests, we look at I'd like to talk a touch about the turnover process.
Let's do it.
So I think that not enough folks are talking about how do we improve turnover process, just full stop. And that we believe that it's actually a really interesting measuring stick for how operationally efficient you are across multiple silos, is your ability to go from notice to vacate and exit a happy tenant to rent ready, and then introduce and go through that process into a new happy tenant. And we look at that as like a real measuring stick of your operational efficiency because of how hard it is. And it's also, so, not traditionally, not altruistic here, but it's also the point where I think we're the best in the world at helping organizations make that change through technology. And for us, like, we have a digital make ready board, digital inspection process, but whether it's through our technology or others, the importance of digitizing that process, being able to measure it and then improve it and compare across properties, we think there is an absolute gold mine of NOI and operational efficiency today in the marketplace.
I, I believe that to be true. It's a broken it's broken, it's fragmented, I think many of us in this industry, especially people who've been around for a long time, have bolted together systems and processes and disciplines and routines from all the companies that we've worked for and with over time, right? Is so I'm interested in so digital make ready board. The second there's a trigger, let's call that trigger notice to vacate, whether it be in Yardi, MRI, or whatever other systems you integrate with. I imagine you integrate with all of them, or at least the majors. That notice to vacate trigger, does that is it dynamic enough such that it schedules out germane to move-in dates and other various pieces of data that are germane to that process, and then does it auto schedule carpet cleaner, service tech, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes. So one, like, we're trying to provide visibility and automation to a process. So the
Okay.
first thing is we can adapt our workflow to your process. So whatever the steps are. So what we recommend is once notice vacate kicks, we'll do a pre-move out inspection. So probably 60 days out. So we dictate if it's at community A, if the person who's going to do that is your community manager or your first line maintenance, whatever that person is, they will get automated a work order to go complete this inspection. Now, that'll have all the data it needs to enter the suite. It'll have broken down every room from Yardi. It'll know all the pieces. You'll follow your process, be prompted to take the pictures, but really complete that pre-move out inspection. So from there, we're going to identify the work. So really, that's also our scoping. So you may have a standard clean and paint on everyone, and then we're looking for unique repairs, whatever's part of your punch process, we incorporated it. So let's say out of that inspection, we're going to do a couple internals like a paint and clean, but we have an external, whatever it may be. We're able from right in the suite, that 60 days out, to create all of that scope, create those additional work orders, even dispatch to the vendor within the suite, be able to say, so if say you have a third party cleaner or painter, and they know for 2 bedrooms, it's a set $800. I can click paint vendor, boom, in the suite and send a request for 800. They can select yes. We can schedule it that day for down the road. So what that piece does is by kicking off that first pre-move out inspection, it drives scope. It's going to create work orders. It's going to do all of these elements within SuiteSpot, and it's going to create the right next steps and tasks for others. So that may be approval tasks, it may be scheduling tasks, but all of that workflow gets built within SuiteSpot. And because we have an engine for escalations, as soon as something's not done, it escalates up with a notification. Hey, this pre-move out inspection was supposed to happen within 5 days, hasn't happened. It's now. So what we find is there's no accountability today for a bunch of preventive maintenance stuff, that things getting done. So we believe in a process of work by exception. So we assume everything's done, but as soon as it gets escalated to a manager or one step above, they know it's not. So everything, they only see the work that wasn't completed on time or was urgent. They assume everything else is done because it hasn't been alerted.
That makes sense. I like that. I want to cue off of something that you just said about scopes, because this was in the packet that I read, which I thought was super interesting, super powerful. I say the word super a lot, but the
Too much time around Gary.
it must be yeah, super fantastic, Gary. Yeah. So the return on investment calculator that you have built into your technology. Tell us about that, because I think that is interesting.
Yeah, like return on investment for what we're talking about is unique. So we've tried to calculate it in different ways, but I actually think that those conversations are more personal than what our online calculator does. And if anything, it's a curiosity peak,
Mm-hmm.
because the best way for us to understand ROI is to spend some time and understand what is your current risk parameters, how much time is your team spending, and really where is the gap. Because I do think, like, I'm not a big believer in it that our industry buys a ton on ROI or trusts it, right? And I also don't want to think that we know anything that we don't. So I would say let's all be careful of all online ROIs. However, that doesn't say what I believe we do can't materially affect your ROI as far as driving efficiencies with your team, better management, better scheduling. We have great examples of shaving days and days off average times for turns. However, I do think that in our industry, there's a natural skepticism to ROI, and we should. If you're on my website looking at our ROI calculator, you should be skeptical about it. But I'd love to talk to you about the reality, right? And maybe it's probably I'm usually a better salesperson than that, uh, but it's the truth.
No,
The reality is, like, the path of automating, digitizing, and then measuring your maintenance operations will have material ROI. But anyone who says that on 7 inputs on the website that they can tell you what that is total, they're wrong. We're wrong too.
no. You know what I appreciate about that methodology of sales is that it's truth, and it gives me a lot of trust in the person who's saying, you know what, look, it's there, it's fun, but it's just as flawed as every other calculation that you put out
It,
there.
it,
So,
it is. But I would say, though, the difference is that if you haven't looked at some of these key processes around how maintenance is supporting your residents, on improvements on turnover processes, measuring how quickly your guys are resolving work orders, all of those things make you better. And I believe genuinely that we can enable organizations to improve maintenance operations, to measure it, and so that I feel very passionately about. I see it every day in our clients. To be able to say that I can quantify it for you tomorrow is not true. Now, and I wish I could. It would make my job far easier.
oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
But I got to say really quickly before I ask you a question about it, the accounting piece of that. I brings to mind, for whatever reason it does. National Apartment Association puts on Maintenance Mania every year, kind of regionally. Then it sort of ladders up to the big crescendo moment at the National Apartment Association big thing out in San Diego this year. But anyway, it's like this fun competition that the maintenance guys get to be involved in. And my imagination tells me when you have this sort of put in place enterprise wide, you have this sort of leaderboard of guys, even if they're not in name, they're there in sort of property, and they could be name whatever. We could
yep.
we could talk about that, but I mean, if you see your name at the top of the leaderboard or you see your name at the bottom of the leaderboard, my imagination tells me that you're going to do something about that. You're either going to do whatever you can to stay on top, or you're going to do whatever you can to get on top, right?
Exactly. Like we have a callbacks leaderboard, right? Very,
Right.
very popular. Like, so, average time to resolution on work orders. And again, it's like gamification can be really powerful for having your teams be excited. And like, again, the maintenance team are underserved. And I think there's a real bias. The bias can be that they're unable to take on technology, that but I look at those folks as, hey, they just want to be great at their jobs. And when they are, like, let's reward them, let's showcase it. And we provide that pathway. So, I think that can be a very powerful thing to say, hey, guys, we have real data points now, not just your hours logged and your number of work orders resolved. That doesn't tell a story, but we can tell you the specific type of work orders. We can say how many callbacks are related from your first calls. All of these pieces that can actually say, well, these are key performance indicators of our maintenance team, and we can reward from there. We can actually look to train from there. And I mentioned this early, but it's incredibly powerful to cross compare teams at properties, right? Because you can look to, like, I'm sure you get this, right? And especially, like, I'll take out that assumption word again. okay, hey guys, you guys aren't doing this as well as the other guys. Okay, fine. If you can tell them with data, guys, we have this problem. We have these type of work orders. You guys are having 2x the callbacks on these. Let's dive in. Are we sending the wrong person? Are we sending the wrong equipment? But that from real data becomes powerful. And we look to have data change decisions, change workflows because the assumption isn't working.
It brings to mind the so for guys like me that say, hey, every gamified scenario for all the benefits that you just described has an element of gaming the system in a whole different definition of the word gaming.
Yeah.
But you've addressed that in here in some ways, and forgive, I don't remember it intimately, but some of those workflows, a team member can't move forward in the process until they do something, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So there's triggers, right? So for instance, if I'm in a unit, let's say I'm doing one of those pre-move out inspections, and I declare that there's a chargeback. I can see something that's clearly damaged. That's gonna force me to take a picture, leave a note, right? It's a small example of triggers, but we use them all throughout SuiteSpot to ensure that we're complete on whatever that is,
Yeah.
right? And so we do all different types of triggers that drive that, but really it's to ensure that we have the best outcomes possible. And I think the one piece that we're I think really far ahead is we can share work orders across teams. Multiple people can work on it at the same time. So we can, and that like that's just the truth. Those things happen. They happen at the same time. We can support each other. So we're able to do that really really seamlessly, and then all of a sudden we're getting better outcomes.
I love it. I just think, yeah, and to one of your chief points in that part of that answer, when you can share data across enterprise and you make it visible to the entire enterprise, you drive behaviors that in my imagination are just of benefit to the community. They're of benefit to the individual, but they're a benefit to the team and to the community and to the enterprise as a whole. And back to your prior point to that, the NOI, maybe you can't put math to it or precise math to it, but it is positive.
Like you had a YouTube video the other day, but talking about running to the problem, right?
Yeah,
A little bit, right?
yep.
And so I thought about that for this part of the conversation, where highlighting the problem is not a negative, right? It is like let's run to this fire, and what data can clearly provide us is saying, hey, the issue that we thought was there is there. It's pervasive. We're seeing it, and it's having these effects. Let's run to that fire, right? And I think the in the absence of data, you can talk about the issue, but we can't quantify it, right? And maybe like anyway, that's a big piece for us in that we like our clients are able to pinpoint the fire and run to it, and they put it out before it's become a rager, right? And I think that gets enabled by us just from better data.
It seems like you're not only are you running to the fire, to your point, you're carrying along the tools necessary to put the fire out. You're not running there to figure out that it's a fire.
Right. Well, and maybe the fire can be on vendor and vendor management. So, for instance,
Yeah.
if you're looking at your average turn, for whether it's back to back or different types of turns, your cost comparative over region, right? And if your turns may be happening at the same speed, but if you're spending 6,000 per turn over here versus 4,000, well, is there a vendor opportunity? Can we now? So within our suite, we're able to have all of your locked in pricing, but also we can now take a single bid and mail it an email to multiple vendors and have them compete for it. So, for instance, let's use that example of, hey guys, in Austin, whatever reason, we're paying 50% more on turns. I can see it here. Let's be more competitive with our vendors. Let's send out 3 quotes on every paint and clean, and let's get them back. And we can do that within SuiteSpot. It won't add any time, but we think in Austin, we're high. Let's go fix that problem. And if we do 100 turns this year, we save 2,000 of turn. We've put 200K to the good, and all we've had to do is manage our vendors a touch tighter. So when we say run to the fire, I don't want everyone to think that we're talking about people issues all the time.
Right, right.
Right? This is about the data that we're pulling out of the system to say, how can we get better? What do we care about? Right? And what we found is, like, our clients are brilliant, right? They're able to look at that data and say, hey, like this is a we can look at this comparative. We can, for asset tracking, our average mean time to fail on our LG fridges is half the time of GE. Like, let's make a change here. And as opposed to the assumption of, man, these LG fridges, we seem to be working on them all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so when I say the run to the fire, the issue the problem that we're trying to solve sometimes isn't always people, but it's great to have the data to say, hey, like that's not congruent with the plan that we want to deliver.
It takes, this is an age old problem in the industry, and it's not just germane to the service side of the business. It's germane across the board. It's, people in the mid-level management roles, regional managers specifically, get caught up in data curation, right? And they can't, in order to make an informed decision, but the data curation takes so much time, they don't get to make that informed decision, or when they do, it's delayed, and it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't matter. But a system like this just puts the data in front of you so that you can make an informed decision real time on the fly.
It's absolutely true. Like, we serve three levels of constituent. So we talked about the field level folks, great app, do their job. Their leadership to dispatch work, to drive their KPIs, to see that performance. But the third level is the dashboards we create for leadership that allows for us to have those key points of, average cost to turn, by region, or how, whether it's work orders, turnovers, callback dashboards. They actually now have kind of put data into what was previously a black hole. They can see, and and previously they'd have analysts be they calling the maintenance guys, everything, pulling it all together. Like, come on, let's not feel like this data isn't there, but how it gets curated and then built is like a level of gymnastics that's really impressive. And it's still pulling from a bunch of static sources and phone calls. And if you think, like, Mike, you laughing like you think you're agreeing with me here. This is what we see,
Yes.
right? So
It's the laugh of validation and confirmation. Yes.
so when we talk about ROI, well, if we're saving 10 hours a month of a BA to pull this together and it's on a dashboard, can we call that part of the return? Right. And it's a small thing, but it is one of those things where, like, the dashboards are real and they can help drive key changes, right? Whether it's vendors, whether it's your FTE pieces, like how we're approaching certain scenarios, whether it be, hey, we need to have our key electrical guy to go be first guy in on electrical, or we get stuck with callbacks. Whatever that is, it's a game changer for you to be able to say, well, the data says this. Let's do this.
So true. Okay, I want to take a hard left, maybe.
Sure.
I want to talk about, or have you talk about, rather. So, I'm not sure how to sort of frame this. I'm going to frame it in the bucket of IoT and sensor technology, and how sensors can automate the data curation, right? In some cases, maybe in a lot of cases, and to the point where you have, maybe a whole new definition of smart appliances, such that an appliance can self-diagnose and feed data into your system, and then have labor called out, like, all behind the scenes, right? And are you there today? If not, like,
No, I'll share where we are and where we're going, but I think where you're talking about is really interesting. So, and if I'm hearing you right, so today we can asset tag. So every appliance
yes,
has an asset. Boom. Today, what we're able to do is, when you asset, we can upload the warranty, the PDF, even a video or other documents, how to operate it, a full
yeah,
history, the last time it was changed. We can even create automated checklists to prove, hey, we've now done this, either a fire log, or we've checked this boiler, we've done this action. So that's what we can do today.
okay,
Where we want to get to is being able to, when we scan it, drive decisions. For instance,
yep,
I'm now working on this fridge. I have a $300 part coming in. Am I going to replace the fridge or not? And be able to go replace. So today we're able to say, is there warranty? show me the information about it. Where we want to get to is an automated process of hey, am I repair, replace? What's the pathway here? And I think that's a vision that we have. And because one of we're able to take in the data from the field that says this is the issue, connect it to the part, connect it to the hours, and make an estimate. But we're still a couple quarters away from that being in field. But again, I think it's a great vision of how do we leverage, and I think asset tagging is going to take a few years within our industry, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
like right now, like if you've got 50,000 current assets to tag, it's difficult,
Right.
right?
Right.
So we look at asset tagging today more for boilers, major components of the site, right? And can we drive that? Now we do have clients who are using asset tagging for everything. It's the process of first tagging everything within your annuals that can be time that can really drive a ton of time.
That makes sense to me, and I do think that's probably a combination of not only sort of asset tagging things that are in place today, and then I know there's an HVAC company, for example, that Modily, I believe, is or Motili. I always mispronounce their name. I apologize. But they're literally manufacturing condensing units. As soon as they come off, they're embed. They have sensors embedded in them that are connected to a labor distribution system. So if you put this condensing unit, the story I'm telling myself is you had this condensing unit in one of our multifamily communities. You could connect that to SuiteSpot Technologies such that that condensing unit knows when it's going to break down. It knows in advance of the time it's going to break down. So it notifies your system, which kicks off the whole service request workflow, and the resident never knows, right? He only knows because we're telling him, hey, your air conditioner is about to run out of Freon and we're going to charge it up today so that you don't have to worry about it.
So we have open APIs and a really aggressive component of how IoT is going to affect multifamily, whether it's solar panels, whether it's IoT and smoke detectors and other components of what'll be property operations. We're excited about. I'll be careful what I can say here, but we're excited about that future because
Yeah.
we look at SuiteSpot as having a role in some of that future of IoT, right? And how we're built enables that. So, like we are like, well, yeah, like I think there's some great examples, whether it's, smoke detectors or Freon or other pieces or your solar on the roof. There's elements that are having unique sensors that we could see as part of our vision of, again, providing that health check of the property. So today we look at health check from is all of the preventative maintenance issues or tasks completed? Are we, have we, do we have all of our logs? Do we have everything done? Are we on top of everything? Are we on top of our warranties? But this has that other element of almost another elements of that health check we're really keen on bringing into the system.
It's beautiful. When all that comes to be, I want to have you back and talk about it. So
we look at how do we get data into the operator as frictionless as possible.
Makes sense. I want to go back. I just remember that's just the way my brain works that I was going to ask you a question about accounting. So we're all over the board here, but in my head we have the ability. So if the system calls out to a cleaner who is outside of our labor pool, right, and that cleaner comes in, does work, somehow there's a proof of work that happens. Call it a picture, call it a, hey, I'm done. Maybe there's a dollar threshold that sort of governs that. We trust you under 50. We don't trust you over 50 or something like that. And from that point, so I have this vision in my head that accounting at some point becomes completely automated and multifamily companies across the nation can, I don't want to reduce headcount, but maybe you repurpose, reskill. Anyway, that proof of work payment can happen with no people being involved except for the cleaner and the somebody that says,
Absolutely. So in this example, let's assume that the cleaner's a third party or
yes,
a vendor. So yep, they do their work. They have an email login from SuiteSpot that they just go in and say work's completed. Right, that will probably kick off a quality control review. So someone else will get automatic note saying you have 48 hours to go into that suite, do a quality control review of that work, whatever it may be. Also, though, well, that's the easy part. What if there's a change order from the cleaner, or what if there's an issue?
That never happens.
But it's the corner cases that kill us, right? So yeah, we have we're able, that cleaner can do, hey, like this was not a standard clean. There was something in here, like you guys didn't send me the right scope, but this is a change order. This is a 2x clean. We can set auto approves or urgent approves, so they could go in for, you have 30 minutes to approve, or it gets escalated because they're on site. But what we want to be able to do is have that then, so whenever they close off that work order, it's going to automatically sync back to Yardi. It's going to go through payment components, but we're clean. So we can go from SuiteSpot, assign and schedule that work. They come on site, complete that work, click completed work order, synchronize back, and away we go. And now we've had as automated as process as possible, and it's repeatable, right? And it also can account for those change requests, scheduling requests, other pieces, because this is a dynamic process. That's why the whiteboard in the office doesn't work. It doesn't work because of change orders and people get sick and COVID and life, right? So maybe that's what we should change, is that the whiteboard doesn't take into account for life. Right, but that's anyway. So to answer that question, yes. So like that third party comes in, completes that process, and it automatically bills, and away we go.
I love that. The greatest book title I ever saw, I should have bought the book. It said, "Business is awesome, but for people." To all the points that you just made, right? People get sick, people get emotional, people get all kinds of things.
Yeah, we're not using that vendor anymore. That's never happened, right? And though, anyway, so we try to be as flexible as possible, understanding that life happens.
That makes sense. What have we not talked about that you wish we would have talked about? I want to leave it open. We talked about a lot, and we were all over the board, and that's my fault. But anything we've not highlighted here that you think is important to talk about?
No, like I think I wanted us to talk a little bit about turnovers and the plight of the maintenance group. I think they're underserved, and we didn't talk about our labor shortage, but I don't know. I think there's been lots of pieces there, but like maybe that's a question I have for you, right? It's been more than a year that maintenance operations have dramatically suffered from a difficulty both attracting and retaining talent, and it's had an effect, right? Like, what do you see as like what needs to change?
Yeah. Let's see if I can.
You know what? Actually, Mike, I think deep sigh is a great answer. That is a fantastic answer. But it's what a lot of people are saying is I don't know.
I'll take a stab at this, and maybe I'll put an asterisk by it because I don't know the answer. But this is my best attempt at answering this question, and I want to preface by saying that I am really excited for service team members today, because everything that has happened in the world, let's say over the last 24 to 36 months, has put us in a position where organizations across the country, it's not just organizations, it's industries across the country that have service components, and let's focus on multifamily service. People are finally getting paid a higher wage, which I think has been a problem for a very long bit of time. Using Radco as an example, we went through a complete compensation strategy exercise, and it ended up increasing our service team members' pay by big amounts. Is it where they want to be ultimately? Probably not. No one's ever, completely happy with pay. Anyway, I think that was a component, or that's my preface. I think that the industry itself we're competing against some industries that have been introduced. They've probably been around for 10 plus years now, but let's call it the Amazon fulfillment factory, the warehouses and industry, and certainly the building boom that has gone on in this country in the last 4 or 5 years has taken our skilled workforce, right, and put them into jobs that pay on scale, and they just pay wages we cannot compete with, or benefit packages that we cannot compete with. So we're left to try to create cultures that enrich people's lives. If you're doing it right, and I'm not saying Bradco's doing it completely right, but we try to create a culture that enriches the human, not just the worker or the skill that we need out of you, but the human being first, right? We try to treat you with dignity and respect and put you in environments that really enrich your life personally and professionally. And our thesis is that if we do that well, right, if we do that really well and you feel fulfilled and you feel enriched by coming to this place we call work, then the pay, while important, is not going to be the number one driver in terms of you staying or being attracted in the first place to our culture. So the answer is you got to have a dynamic, enriching culture to make up for what you can't compete against out in the marketplace at large.
We agree. I agree. I think also, like, I think one thing that's a little underserviced is the maintenance leader being a dynamic leader, right?
Oh,
And
true
finding great people, promoting them into that leadership, like people work for great people,
That's right.
right? And I think we could foster as a community that role better, right? Just in how that role recruits coaches. Like, there's some great examples in the industry, but I think developing of that role should become part of the focus, right? Because it's going to drive better coaching, better retaining, like, I'm a big believer in that role. And if that role is not super strong on your team, go build that piece, because people don't work for the logo, like they work for people, and great people inspire others to stay, to learn, to be part of something. And I think that piece is underserved.
You nailed it. I had Adrian Danello on the podcast several episodes ago, but he's the biggest champion for service team members in the entire industry, as far as I'm concerned, and he says the same thing. You got to get dynamic leaders in that you're very intentional about teaching, training, mentoring, and coaching into that sort of I don't know what you call it. The
Sure, but that's a career vision too, right?
agree,
And
agree.
how many folks come into those roles, and that's part of the frustration, is I'm not seeing this mobility, where if that role was compensated as a great leader and supported, it provides both a pathway, but also, like, let's build a generation of awesome, like, maintenance leaders who are dynamic, who are coaches, who care about the property, who care about customer service, and that be your retention vehicle.
Agreed. I think what comes to mind for me most out of all of this discussion is people. I think innately people want to be of good character. They want to show up well. They want to show up confident. They want to show up with self-esteem and things of that nature. And business hasn't really been geared to do any of that for people, right? We just want your skill. Just get the job done.
Sure.
And to your point, if we show up as an organization with a people first mentality and we work on what are really character issues and concerns, let's not call them issues and concerns, sorry about that, but just elements of one's person, right? Then you do good work, but not only do you do good work, you go out into the community or you go home at night and you don't kick the cat and you speak well to your children, you speak well to your spouse, right? And if we can do that as companies and organizations and build people in that way, I think to your point, it's a whole different world when you're serving people in that at that high level, right?
I could agree more.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, what a crescendo ending. That was awesome. uh, look, we're almost at an hour here, but I feel like I could talk to you for another hour, no problem. But I want to be respectful of our listeners and our viewers. I want to give you the last word. Anything you want to say about the technology or to the industry at large, unrelated to the technology? This is your time, and then where people can connect with you, and we'll call it a show.
Sure. Like, I think, from one, we're a big proponent of digital transformation in this industry, right? And supporting the maintenance team and their innovation. So if that's a component, if you guys are looking at, or your organization is looking at, hey, how can I improve maintenance operations? We'd love the opportunity to see if we could help. So it's Darren.Sharpe at SuiteSpotTechnology.com. But thank you very much, Mike. It's been great to have this conversation.
Oh, likewise. It's been a thrill, and I mean that from my heart of hearts. So, thank you very much, Darren, for your time and making the investment here. Thanks everybody for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time on Collective Conversation.